He hadn't spoken a single word in 2 years. Not to his servants, not to his solicitor, not to a living soul. Then she arrived at Wyndham Hall, and everything he couldn't say found its way onto the page.
Wyndham Hall stood at the end of a long gravel drive lined with elms whose leaves had already turned, copper and rust, and the faded gold of a summer that no one in the house remembered fondly. It was the last week of October, 1816, and the Derbyshire sky hung low and pewter grey over the estate, threatening rain that had not yet decided to fall. The house itself was handsome. Pale stone, tall windows, a portico with columns that caught the afternoon light, when there was any. 40 rooms, 800 acres, a stable block, a walled garden, a lake that froze every January. The kind of house that should have rung with voices. It did not. James Ashcroft, 6th Duke of Wyndham, had not spoken a word in 2 years and 11 days. Not since the Tuesday in November when his wife, Catherine, had died in the upstairs bedroom, she and the child both, and the house had fallen silent, and James had fallen silent with it. He was 30 years old, dark-haired, grey-eyed, tall in a way that had once been commanding and was now merely gaunt. His clothes were impeccable. Mr. Poole, his valet, saw to that, but they hung on him as though they had been fitted for a larger man. He sat at his desk each morning at 8, attended to correspondence in a precise, slanted hand, and communicated with his household through written notes on slips of cream paper that accumulated on every surface like pale leaves. He was not mad. The house knew this even if the world did not. Mrs. Aldridge, the housekeeper, had served the family for 22 years. She was broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and possessed of a face that could communicate more in a single raised eyebrow than most people managed in a paragraph. She read the Duke's notes, interpreted his silences, and ran the household with a calm authority that never once required him to speak. Mr. Poole, thin and precise as a letter-opener, laid out the Duke's clothes each morning and removed the untouched brandy each night. Old Fenton, the head gardener, worked alongside his Grace in the walled garden every Thursday afternoon without exchanging a single word, and considered these the most companionable hours of his week. The house had adapted. It ran on ink and instinct, and the particular understanding that forms between people who have chosen not to ask questions. And then the solicitor arrived. Mr. Hartley was a careful man. He wore brown. He carried documents in a leather case that smelled of beeswax. He had managed the Wyndham affairs for 9 years, and he did not enjoy what he had come to say.
Your Grace, your uncle has filed a petition with the Lord Chancellor's office. He is seeking to have you declared non compos mentis. If the petition succeeds, Lord Sefton would assume control of the estate, the income, and all decisions pertaining to the dukedom.
James looked at him. Then he picked up his pen, wrote 5 words on a slip of paper, and slid it across the desk. It read, "On what grounds, precisely?"
On the grounds that you have not spoken in 2 years, have not attended Parliament, have refused invitations from the Lord Lieutenant, and have, forgive me, Your Grace, declined to receive the Prince Regent's secretary. The court will want evidence of a stable household, a functioning domestic life, and, with respect, a wife would make this petition very nearly impossible to sustain.
James set down his pen. He looked at the window for a long time. Rain had begun to fall at last, streaking the glass in long, uneven lines. Then he wrote 2 words. Find one. Rose Heywood was 26 years old. She had black hair that she pinned simply, dark brown eyes that missed very little, and a warm complexion that coloured easily in the cold. Her mother, Mary, had died when Rose was 14, a winter fever that took her in 3 days and left the vicarage quieter than any house should be. She lived with her father, Reverend Heywood, in a vicarage outside Ludlow. The rooms were small and draughty and full of books. Rose kept the accounts. Rose managed the parish poor box. Rose wrote her father's sermons when his eyesight troubled him, and sat with the sick when the apothecary could not come, and had long since accepted that her life would be shaped by usefulness rather than romance. She was not bitter about this. She was practical. These are not the same thing, though they are often mistaken for one another. The letter from Lord Sefton arrived on a Thursday. Sefton's terms were plain. He held the patronage of her father's living. If Rose would enter the Duke's household and provide evidence of his incompetence, confused behavior, irrational notes, signs of instability, the living would be secured for her father's lifetime. If she refused, the vicarage would be reassigned by Easter. Rose read the letter twice. Then she put on her grey wool pelisse, took the mail coach to Derby, and presented herself at Mr. Hartley's office.
Lord Sefton has asked me to spy on the Duke of Wyndham. I am here to tell you this, and to offer an alternative. I will marry His Grace. I will present the household the court requires. In return, I want my father's living secured permanently, transferred out of Sefton's patronage and into the gift of the Wyndham estate. And I want it in writing before the wedding.
Mr. Hartley looked at this vicar's daughter in her darned gloves and her plain bonnet and thought that Lord Sefton had made a very serious miscalculation. She arrived at Wyndham Hall on the 14th of November, 3 days after the wedding, a brief, silent ceremony in the chapel at Derby, witnessed by Mr. Hartley and a clerk. James had signed the register. Rose had signed the register. Their hands had not touched. The house was larger than she had expected. Paler. The gravel crunched under her boots, and the elms were nearly bare, and the front door opened before she reached it, which meant someone had been watching from a window.
Your Grace, welcome to Wyndham Hall. I am Mrs. Aldridge. I have prepared the Duchess's rooms in the east wing. They catch the morning light. Shall I show you up, or would you prefer tea first?
Tea, please. And, Mrs. Aldridge, I would be grateful if you would tell me how the household runs. Not how it ought to run, how it actually does.
Something shifted in Mrs. Aldridge's expression. A loosening. The faintest indication that a test had been passed.
Of course, Your Grace.
She met James at dinner. He sat at the head of the table in a black coat and charcoal waistcoat, his dark hair slightly too long, his grey eyes settling on her for one brief, assessing moment before returning to his plate. He did not nod. He did not write a note. He simply looked at her the way one looks at a new piece of furniture, registering its presence without opinion. Rose sat at the opposite end, 14 feet of mahogany and silver candlesticks between them, and ate roast lamb in total silence. She thought, I have married a ghost in a beautiful house. She thought, the lamb is very good. In the days that followed, Rose learned the house. She learned which stairs creaked and which doors stuck, and that the library fire was never lit before noon because His Grace preferred the cold while he worked. She learned that Fenton grew roses in the walled garden, even in winter, coaxing them under glass, and that Mr. Poole pressed the Duke's shirts with a flat iron he kept at a temperature he would not share with the laundry maid. She learned that the house was not unhappy. It was simply waiting, the way a theatre waits between performances. Everything in its place, every curtain drawn at the correct angle. Just no one on the stage. The first letter was practical. Rose left it on his study desk on a Tuesday morning, weighted with a small stone she had found in the garden.
Your Grace, I would like to review the household accounts for the quarter, if you are willing. I should also like to know whether the tenants at Home Farm have been seen to regarding the roof, as Mrs. Aldridge mentioned it in passing. Yours, R.H.
His reply appeared on her writing desk that evening, in a different ink, dark blue where hers had been black.
Accounts in the second drawer of the study desk. Home farm roof repaired in September. The stone is from the lake. J.
The second letter, 2 days later, was less practical.
The drawing room faces north. I have taken the liberty of moving the settee to the south wall, where the afternoon light comes through. I hope you do not mind. Also, the kitchen cat has had kittens in the boot room. 4 of them. Mrs. Aldridge is pretending to disapprove.
His reply came that same night.
The room is improved. How many of the kittens are ginger?
3. The 4th is grey with white paws and has already claimed your second best riding boot.
Then it is hers.
The letters continued. Every 2 days at first, then every day, then twice. A question left in the morning and an answer waiting by evening. An observation at noon and a reply by candlelight. Rose wrote about the house and the grounds and the staff and the particular quality of the December light on the lake at 3:30 when the clouds broke. She wrote about the smell of Fenton's greenhouse, warm earth and green things growing in defiance of the frost. She wrote about Mrs. Aldridge's opinion of the new kitchen maid, which was delivered in a single raised eyebrow that Rose attempted to describe in words and failed. James wrote back. At first his replies were brief. A line, 2 lines, a single dry observation. Then longer still. He told her that the greenhouse had been his mother's. He told her that the lake froze thick enough to walk on in January, and that his father had once driven a pony cart across it for a wager. He drew a small, surprisingly good sketch of the grey kitten asleep in his riding boot. And Rose began to understand something. The house had not stopped communicating when James stopped speaking. It had simply changed languages. Fenton knew which roses to cut by the direction of the Duke's glance. Poole knew whether the day was a good one or a difficult one by which waistcoat James chose. Mrs. Aldridge could read an entire conversation in the way he held his pen. Rose was learning this language too. She noticed that he came to the drawing room now, her drawing room, rearranged to catch the light. He sat in the armchair by the window and read while she wrote letters to her father, and they shared silence the way other couples shared conversation. Easily, without strain. By January, Mrs. Aldridge had moved Rose's place setting to the Duke's end of the table. No one commented on this. Rose passed him the marmalade. He inclined his head in thanks. Their fingers did not touch. The space where they almost touched became the most charged 3 inches in Derbyshire.
I walked past the nursery today. The door was closed. I did not go in. I want you to know that I noticed, and that I will not ask.
He did not reply to this letter. But that evening, he came to the drawing room earlier than usual, and sat closer than usual. And when Rose looked up from her book, she found him watching her with an expression she could not yet read. It was February when she wrote the letter that changed things.
I think this house has been waiting for someone to pay attention to it. The rooms, the gardens, the way the light moves through the gallery in the late afternoon. It is a house that was built to be noticed. I think perhaps it has been lonely.
His reply was waiting on her desk the next morning. 2 lines in his careful, slanted hand.
So have I.
Rose read those 2 words standing by her desk, with her hand pressed over her mouth and her heart doing something she had not given it permission to do. She read them again. She folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the book she was reading, a volume of Cooper's poems she had found in the library, with a cracked spine and a page turned down at a passage about winter evenings. She did not write back that day. She did not trust herself to choose the right words. Instead, she went down to dinner and sat at his end of the table, and when the meal was finished, she said, very quietly,
Good night, James.
It was the first time she had used his Christian name. He looked at her. His grey eyes held hers for a long moment, not guarded, not closed, but open in a way she had not seen before. Then he inclined his head, once, and she saw his hand tighten on the arm of his chair. She left the room. She did not see him press his palm flat against the place where her letter lay folded inside the book of poems. But Mrs. Aldridge did. Lord Sefton came to Wyndham Hall on the 7th of March. He arrived in a black lacquered carriage with a coat of arms on the door, accompanied by his own valet, and a look of studied concern that fooled no one who knew him. He was 53, silver-haired, immaculately tailored in a dove-grey coat and burgundy waistcoat, with a gold watch chain and the particular kind of smile that never quite reaches the eyes.
My dear niece, I may call you that, I hope. How well you look, and how cozy you have made things here.
He stayed for 3 days. He toured the house. He inspected the accounts. He sat at dinner and filled the silence with a stream of polished conversation that made the quiet house feel suddenly loud and wrong, as though someone had opened all the windows in a church. He watched James. He watched Rose. He noted every interaction, the past marmalade, the proximity at the table, the way Rose answered questions that were directed at the Duke with a composure that suggested rehearsal. He smiled. He complimented the lamb. He told Rose her dress was charming, in a tone that made charming sound like a very small word.
I must say, I admire your dedication, Mrs. Ashcroft, taking on a household like this, with so little experience. A vicar's daughter from, where was it? Ludlow? Quite the adjustment.
Shropshire, Lord Sefton. And I find the adjustment suits me very well.
On the final evening, after dinner, Rose excused herself to the corridor. She was shaking, and she did not want James to see it. 3 days of Sefton's smiling condescension had cost her more than she wanted to admit. He followed her.
You are a clever girl, I will grant you that. But do not overestimate your position. The petition will proceed. A silent duke and a vicar's daughter playing house will not stop it.
The courts will see a stable household and a lawful marriage. That is all they require.
The courts will see what I tell them to see. Your father's living, Miss Heywood, I beg your pardon, your grace, can be reassigned in a matter of weeks. 1 letter, that is all it takes. 1 letter from me, and your father is out on the road.
He took her arm then, not gently. His fingers pressed into the fabric of her sleeve, and his face was very close, and his voice was the voice of a man who had never been refused a thing he wanted.
You are nothing, a convenience. And when I have what is mine, you will go back to Shropshire and be grateful I let you.
He was standing in the doorway. No one had heard him approach. He stood very still, black coat, white shirt, grey eyes fixed on his uncle's hand where it gripped his wife's arm. His face held no expression, none at all. The way a sky holds no expression in the moment before lightning. And then, For the first time in 2 years, 2 months, and 23 days, James Ashcroft, Duke of Wyndham, opened his mouth and spoke.
Rose.
Just that. Her name. One word in a voice cracked and rough from disuse. The corridor went absolutely silent. Sefton's hand froze on her arm. James looked at his uncle. When he spoke again, each word was deliberate and precise, as though he were learning the shape of language again and choosing to spend it only where it mattered.
Remove your hand from my wife, or I will remove you from this house, from this county, and from every corner of good society I can reach. And I assure you, uncle, I can reach all of them.
Sefton released her arm. He stepped back. For one moment his composure cracked, not into fear, but into the bewildered fury of a man who has just watched his careful plans collapse because he underestimated a silent room. He left Wyndham Hall within the hour. His carriage wheels on the gravel were the loudest sound the house had heard in years. James did not speak again that night. He did not need to. He took her hand as they walked back toward the drawing room, and his grip was warm and certain, and he did not let go. Rose pressed her lips together and breathed through the shaking that she had not allowed Sefton to see, and felt the rough pad of James's thumb move once across her knuckles. They sat in the drawing room until the fire burned low, side by side, in silence. But it was a different silence now. Not the silence of a man who could not speak, but the silence of two people who did not need to. The next morning, there was a letter on her desk, longer than any he had written in his blue ink, in his careful hand, and Rose read it standing by the window with the March light falling on the page.
Rose, I have spent 2 years in silence and found it bearable. I have spent 4 months writing to you and found it something close to joy. You came to this house because you were practical and brave and had no better option, and you have made it a place I recognize again. I cannot promise to be the man I was before. I think that man is gone. But the man who is left would very much like to sit beside you at breakfast for the rest of his life, if you will have him. Not as an arrangement, not as a convenience, as yours. You once wrote that this house was waiting for someone to pay attention to it. You were right, but it was not the house that was waiting. It was me, James.
Rose folded the letter. She pressed it against her heart in a gesture she would have mocked herself for a year ago. Then she went downstairs, walked into the study where James sat at his desk, and placed her hand on his shoulder.
I would like breakfast to be at the same end of the table. Always.
James looked up at her, and for the first time in longer than anyone could remember, the Duke of Wyndham smiled. The petition was withdrawn in April. It is difficult to argue that a man is incompetent when he attends the quarter sessions, writes a letter to the Lord Chancellor that is described in legal circles as devastating, and is seen walking the grounds of his estate each morning with his wife on his arm and a grey kitten following 3 paces behind. James spoke more after that night, not often, not easily, but enough. He spoke to Rose at breakfast and to Mrs. Aldridge about the week's menus, and to Fenton about the roses. His voice remained low and rough, as though it had been weathered by its years of disuse, and Rose thought it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. But they never stopped writing letters. Even years later, even when the house was full of noise, children's footsteps on the stairs, the grey cat's descendants asleep in every sunny window, Fenton's boy learning to garden beside his father. Even then, Rose would sometimes find a slip of cream paper on her desk, blue ink, 2 lines. The light in the gallery is particularly fine today. Come and see. And she always did.